Between 2020 and 2050, McKinsey projected that 800 million young people in Africa will be requiring jobs, and 900 million people will be born into an African city or be moving into an African city, like migrating from the rural areas into the city. This is something that should happen over a space of 30 years. People look at this and say these aren't great stats. Why? Because African cities are already not doing well. They're terrible at service delivery. There are certain things that are common about African cities. Number one, access to water is a serious challenge. Number two, power meaning electricity is a serious challenge. Number three, access to employment / economic opportunities is also a challenge relative to the demand for jobs within the economy. There are other things, of course, depending on the country that you're at and depending on the part of the city within the country that you're at. Infrastructure is not as much as a problem, but transport infrastructure, when we're talking about roads and highways, is an issue in Africa, either because they're terrible, non-existent, or there's not enough of these roads and highways to service the demand, right? Because there are a lot more people that are driving in the continent than was the case a decade ago. So traffic jams have just become a feature of life. Cities don't have effective transit systems where in developing countries, other developing countries and developed countries, you can cheaply go across the country because there's a metro, more like the city, because there's a metro system, there's a tram, all these options, even a bus line. We don't have enough of that infrastructure in African cities. I mean services. But yeah, it's all part of infrastructure. You find out that the quality of the housing stock, some places and in some parts of the city, it's brilliant. It's actually world class. And in other parts, it's a terrible sight to behold. Like, it's the kind of stuff that you think about when you're told this is a third world country. Now, of course, that's not all of Africa, but and it's not even all of the cities within Africa. And it's not even like slums don't form 80% of the cities, probably 15 or 10%, or 5 or 0, because it's not every city in Africa that even has slum settlements. When we have all this data in mind, we then ask, what is the way for African cities? And why should we be excited and not upset about this opportunity, or not upset rather, but nervous about 900 million people moving into the cities? I actually view them as places that could generate genuine economic value and wealth for the people and the citizens of the country. How do we do this? It's very simple. Before I go there, there's also one thing I needed to reference. You find out that the most developed city in a country and the second most developed city in a country, the difference between the two in African contexts is massive, right? Where there are way more people in Harare than there are in Bulawayo, or there are way more people in Nairobi than there are in Mombasa. And there's way more opportunity in Kinshasa than there is in Lubumbashi. And this trend just keeps on going on throughout the continent. Accra, more opportunities in the capital city of Ghana than there are in Kumasi. Or Abidjan with Yamoussoukro. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. We find that there's this serious gap in development because between the largest city and the second largest city, because the biggest cities in Africa usually have an incumbency advantage. That incumbency advantage exists because, number one, they were always the important city because that's where the colonial masters of the time established their base, right? And when independence came, that city continued to be the establishment, the center of the country. And why does this matter? Because when these guys established cities, remember, the goal was not to develop a country, but to extract as much resources as was required within a country. So these cities would serve as mini bases of this colonial empire, okay? I don't want us to think too much about this and think in terms of racial and sentiments and East versus West or anything. I'm just trying to explain the dynamics of development. These cities were not built for creating opportunities for everyone. These were just built as little bases that people can live in while they're taking resources out of the whole country. You see this with how certain infrastructure lines are like, where you can find a country with a lot of roads and highways. Even today with the current development that is happening, some of this we owe to our development partners. You've got strong infrastructure links. But if we study the strength of these infrastructure links, these are roads and highways that start where the mines are and end where the ports are. So this is a problem that is just continued even though we are independent now, right? We see that with the roads and highways. We see that with the railway lines. They are not built to create opportunities for everyone. They were built to service an extractive economy, right? And when these guys left, as independence came into the continent, they still had the incumbency advantage that they were the most developed places within the whole country, right? Because not as much attention was given to developing other parts because there was no need. If we can have places to sleep at, we can have roads, and we're able to take the minerals or take the agricultural produce, then we're done in this place. So that's why you find out these towns and cities across the countries they're not places that anyone who reasonably wants to have a great future and wants to have $100,000 house would want to go to, because remember, the goal is to extract. But remember, with the capital cities, they have that incumbency advantage of being the most developed place. For that reason, the country optimized its economic growth story around that one city, right? And because African economies are small, because look at this, all of Africa is a $3 trillion economy and you've got 1.5 billion people. India, similar population, but a larger economy. They had $4 trillion. For the longest time, India was actually behind Africa if we put all our GDPs together as a continent, right? But now they've overtaken us because India is growing way faster than Africa. India is one economy. And because they are one economy, that is got this massive $4 trillion scale, there is so much opportunities that can be distributed within the country. That is why you've got New Delhi, you've got Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai, Bengaluru, Hyderabad. Like, these all are massive cities in and of themselves. And they've got so many people that are living there that you will not find a situation where, of course, with New Delhi and Mumbai absorb a lot of the demand for people. But they're not the only cities and places where people are going to in India, because it's not the only option. These other cities that I mentioned, your Bengaluru and your Chennai, where you look at Bengaluru and they look at it as the Silicon Valley of India. The opportunities are better spread around because there are so many opportunities. You couldn't just concentrate them in one place. Otherwise, that one city with all the opportunities would have 100 million people population, right? But now in Africa, because we are a $3 trillion economy divided amongst 54 countries, each city, or each country rather, has a small economy, right? Tens of billions of dollars. We look at Ghana, which has performed very well, growing very, very, very quickly over the past decade plus. They have done impressive stuff. They are now a $112 billion economy. That's at least the 2025 numbers. And we look at that and say, wow, it's a $100 billion economy. But guess what? Los Angeles makes $100 billion in weeks. But Ghana makes $100 billion after the whole year has ended, right? Which means if we're to look at Ghana as a whole economy, in the context of Los Angeles, it's good as maybe a massive neighborhood. Now, of course, Los Angeles is not a fair comparison because Los Angeles is a mighty economy and they are like, it's a very, very big city. Like, actually, let me search the numbers out right now. Los Angeles population. Los Angeles has a population of 3.88 million people. Let me actually find out the metro population because, Greater Los Angeles population. There you go. There are 18 million people within the Greater Los Angeles region, right? And the Los Angeles GDP is $1.3 trillion, meaning 3 of these cities is more than all of Africa. Or two of these cities plus the GDP of the state of Arizona, right, which is not that big a state, is equal to all of Africa. Serious stuff. These guys have got the scale. So that $100 billion economy that we are proud of in Ghana, by the way, this is not taking a jab at Ghana, because Ghana is actually a leading country within the continent. The $100 billion leading economy is just as good as a massive neighborhood of 1.5, well, a collection of neighborhoods of 1.5 million people in Los Angeles, right? It's not a lot. So when you then look at the numbers this way, you get to realize the opportunities, right, and that are there to spread in a country of that scale are actually not a lot. That is why you only have one major city that is doing very well in Africa, in every country in Africa, and the second best cities are a gap behind. And so with all the infrastructure problems I mentioned and the opportunities that I've mentioned of more people coming into the cities, what are we supposed to do? Number one, realize that there's actually a demand for cities, right? And cities can serve as an engine for growth in the economy in this way. Number one, because of the construction/real estate industry. The real reason why real estate does not do well in Africa is because the facilities and the opportunities for people to borrow to buy their houses are not as robust in Africa as they are in the developed world. And we have to begin to organize ways for people to easily get a mortgage or a bond at great interest rates to buy houses. Because when we create this opportunity, and also by that, we also consider building a massive construction industry that can build a lot of houses every year at a great price. Because when you've got a massive industry, you've got massive economies of scale, meaning the cost of each unit of house being introduced to the market is lower. That's another reason why Harare real estate is expensive. The rate of construction is not keeping up with the rate of demand, right? To buy houses at really high prices, you know. And I use Harare as an example because our real estate is among the most expensive in the continent. We actually are having a historic real estate boom in the city, right? So, like as in relative to the whole continent, where the city is doing very well in the real estate industry. And so when we see that, we then have to find out how then do we create the capacity for us to build 10, 20, 30, 50, 100,000, 200,000 homes every year, depending on the size of the nation. So that, like in Africa, so that we can have enough affordable housing and high quality housing. When you do that, that real estate industry in and of itself plus construction becomes a source of wealth. Because like it or not, we can talk about the technological advancements that helped China to do well in manufacturing. But real estate has for the longest time been the backbone of the Chinese economy, right? It has been. It will be, but not to the level that it was. And every country that wants to do well has to create opportunities for the real estate industry not to be 13% of the economy, but closer to 20% or even above 20%, but not 30% because at that point that's too much, you know. So that's the first thing. There are opportunities for people who like building houses, for people that like to be architects, for people that are into finance, that are into banking, to create the facilities and the products for people to be able to buy houses affordably. You know, take out a mortgage to buy a house. So that's the first place where a lot of wealth can be made within these cities, hence generating wealth for the country. The second, which is the other part, is simple. It's actually much more lucrative. It's actually much more lucrative. When you've got millions of people coming together to be in one place, right? They are buying houses in this place. They shop in this place. They take their children to school in this place. They do everything in that place. You create a consumer economy. And it's easier to have a situation where you want to service demand, where 1 million people are in one city, than 1 million people are in 10 towns, each of 100,000 people, or are in 100 villages, each with 10,000 people, right? because the dynamics of transportation, and any kind of business that you would want to launch in a city, and the operations thereof, marketing, getting the office space or getting the retail space, stocking demand, bringing stock for the things that your company, buying stock from the suppliers for the things your company is going to sell, looking for people to hire, the entire ecosystem, you find it within the city. And because of that, it's easier to build an economy when people are within the cities. Also, the mobile penetration is better. One of the reasons being because the cost of phones and the access or the opportunity to buy these gadgets is a lot better in the cities than it is in the rural areas. And also, telecommunications companies invest more into having a solid product within the cities than they do in the middle of nowhere, right? And because of that, you find out that an internet economy can exist in the cities. So when we then begin to think about the digital economy, the consumer market, and the entire ecosystem that drives this city, not just of people who want to consume things, but people that actually go to work and are gaining expertise in different things. Like you've got a city with a lot of doctors and nurses and plumbers and electricians and construction workers and teachers and all these things. You have an ecosystem where, because everyone is in the same place, the economy can grow much faster because we can get a hold of each other quicker. We can distribute the services that we need towards each other faster. And so when we begin to think about where we want our countries to go, especially for the countries that have the population or meaning the scale to support this, begin to think about not how you can improve the current cities only, right? Because that process is very expensive. Rather, think about how are you going to build new cities. And by the way, these new cities don't even have to start off like, oh, okay, we're going to look for this place in the middle of nowhere and try to create demand where it does not exist. You can create a city that is a couple of kilometers, 10, 20, 30, 40 kilometers away from the successful city, and build all this housing stock there. And basically the facilities, just as if they were all massive neighborhoods and just massive real estate projects, to ensure that people can have affordable housing options and affordable living options out of the main city. But then begin to build and position that collection of neighborhoods and various real estate projects where you could maybe have started with tens of thousands of people to become hundreds of thousands of people and to become 1 million people, and to actually begin to build institutions within that place. When you begin to think like that, that is how we can begin to see that these towns or these satellite cities can actually become successful cities in and of themselves that can create opportunities for the people. And when you're building these new cities, the idea is scale them to the point that this one city can have 3 million people, 4, 5, 6, 10, 15, 20 million people cities. Why are we trying to aim for high numbers? Because in 20 million people cities, there are certain kinds of businesses that you cannot start in a city with 1 million people that you can start when they are 20. Or even 5. Okay? At least because of where Africa still is. We've got a lot of development to do. But when you have got 5, 10, 15, 20 million people in one place, you can actually enable a tech industry and innovative industries to begin to develop. And through those innovative industries, you can create billion-dollar companies. And these multi-billion-dollar enterprises are the companies that get lots of profit, and through those profits have a lot of capital to then invest back into ensuring that that city can do well. Of course, through by investing back into their own business. But as these businesses scale, they are bringing a lot more economic opportunity to that city. And because of that, a lot of people are getting employed and using their products, and also the quality of these products are becoming better. And because of that, the business is making a lot more profit, and the cycle keeps on going on. And this does not only have to be about tech-oriented products, by the way. Just having, someone can just think and say, you know what, I want to be the sole supplier or the biggest supplier of eggs, right, in the city. You cannot think about that from a context of, I want to make $100 million when you're trying to work with a village with 100,000 people. But when you're dealing with a market of 7 million people, you can easily build a massive hatchery that is a $100 million business in X amount of years. So with that being said, It's time for us to begin thinking about how do we build new cities in Africa, and how do we build them to be much more affordable, and how do we create opportunities for people to buy houses, the financing, so that it can be much more affordable for people to buy houses. But as we are designing these new cities, we then think about how do we ensure the problems we have or had in existing African cities do not replicate themselves in these new cities. We make sure that the roads and highways are functional, the street lights are there, all the places are safe, there are metro lines, there are bus lines, the airports are fantastic, the infrastructure is peak. Once we do that, cities can now become engines of economic growth in a country. I thank you for tuning in.